Next week, Erev Shabbos, I won't be around. I will be in America. So I'm sure that Friday morning, when it comes, I'll miss Torah's Chaim. And I hope somebody might miss me as well. So, Baruch Hashem. So many times we speak about a mitzvah of the parasha. And many times we speak about Inyan de Yom, especially before Yom Tovim. And today we have an opportunity to speak about the parasha and Inyan de Yom. We are in the midst of the Sefiras. This week we just passed the middle, the tipping point of the Sefiras. And it's this week's parasha, Parasha Semoir, Svartim Lachem, Amochasayabas, Miyom Aviyachem, Es Omer HaTenufo. And today we will be discussing a question I was asked a few years ago when I wrote a tshuva, which is somewhat of a chiddush. So I was approached by a rav in a shul, in an old age home, in a nursing home. And most of the people davening in that minyan are elderly people. Some of them are shavach and feeble. So usually they have a very early marav after the plag, because many people get tired later and they won't be able to eat properly. And so what is he supposed to do regarding Sefiras HaOmer if they daven marav before the Shekiah, la'acha plag hamincha? So many shuls, and that is minig Ashkenaz, daven marav after the plag. How would the same refer to Sefiras HaOmer? So let's start off from the top of our page. The tool writes in Siman Tov Beites, Achar hatfilo, מתחילים לספר HaOmer, שזמנו מתחילת ליל תז זין בניסן. ומוינה והוילך ממתס יום, וזמן הספירה מתחילת הלילה. אפילו אינוי לילו ממש, אלא סופק חשיכה, יכולים לספור, and בין השמושי, סופק יום, סופק לילה, you could count. That's the psak of the tool, based on his great father, the Rosh, source number 2. פרשתי ונרד, בסופק שייכה יוכל לבורך, ואין צורך להמתן עד שיבד אלילו, כיוון דה בסריקה דרבנון. ספירס HaOmer בזמן הזה דרבנון. That's the opinion of Rav Rishonim. It's not the opinion of the Rambam. But Rav Rishonim, Tosfos, and the Rosh assumes that Sefiras HaOmer b'zman hazeh is only midrabanan. So ben hashmoshes is a sveika derabanan. You could count with the brocha. Va'oid nera. And this is a chiddush. The odif tfeis samach lechashecha mishum temimois. It's not only a b'diavad, it is preferable before nightfall mishum temimois. So this is a new definition of temimois. Temimois means entire days, entire cycle of 24 hours. And therefore it is preferable not to wait after Tzeis HaKechavim, Odef Samach L'Chashecha Mishum Temimos. What does Samach L'Chashecha mean? Does it mean Bein HaShmoshes or even before Bein HaShmoshes? L'chayre, it means Bein HaShmoshes, because usually Chashecha is Tzeis HaKechavim. By the Shekiah, it's not really dark. So usually when we refer to Chashecha, it means Tzeis HaKechavim. So what the Rosh means to say is, it is not only permissible to count Sefira ben HaShmoshes, it is recommendable. It is preferable, Mishum Tamimois. Shulchan Aruch, Siv Beis, Im To'u B'Yom HaMe'unan, and by mistake they counted too early. It was a very cloudy day, so it seemed to be dark, and they thought it is already after nightfall, or maybe after the Shekiah. To'u B'Yom HaMe'unan, V'birchos Sefiras HaOmer, Chayzem Lispor Mishkish Techshach. So obviously, this halacha could only be acceptable if the first Sefira, they weren't Yoitze. If they were Yoitze with the first Sefira, or even a suffix whether they were Yoitze with the first Sefira, they cannot say a brocha again. So what's the revusa? If a person 8 o'clock in the morning makes a brocha and counts Sefira, would that prevent him from counting by night with a brocha? What's the revusa of this sif? If they, by mistake, counted too early, They count again after nightfall. What is the revusa? So obviously, there must be some chiddush and some revusa. Then the Shekiah goes on. Amadaktakim einam seifrim atzeisa kechomim v'chein ra'ui la'asot. This halacha clearly indicates if you want to be machma, wait for tzeisa kechomim, but you don't have to. And that is the opinion of the Rosh. Even lechatchila, you could count the bein hashmoshes after the Shekiah. And the Shekiah comes la'afuke from the Rosh that says it is preferable to count before tzeisa kechomim. Shekiah says, no. Amadaktikim, wait for tzeisa kechomim. So on one hand, the Shekiah follows the Torah, follows the Rosh. You could count the bein hashmoshes. Contrary to what the Rosh writes, it's preferable to count bein hashmoshes and not wait for tzeisa kechomim. Shekiah, sources in Rashba, no. It is preferable to wait for tzeis hakechomim. Siv Gimel, and that is the more confusing Siv. Hamaspalel matzibur meba'od yom. Moine imoem belo bracha, v'im yiskor b'layla, yavorech v'yispoyam. You're davening with a minion that davens early. Count together with them, but without a bracha. If you remember later, then you count with a bracha. But I already counted. That's al tanai, and that's why you didn't say a bracha. And you bear in mind, if I will remember later by night, then I will count with a bracha. But if I forget, because if you leave Shiur, it is very likely that you will forget to count, then at least I counted with a tzibur. What does this seif mean? That's a machlokes between the Taz and the Choik Yankov. Two different pirushim. The Taz says, Amesparel im hatzibur meba'od yom means after the Shekiah, bein hashmoshes. And he wants to be min hamedaktikim. And Siv Gimel follows Siv Beis. Hamedaktikim einam soifrim ad tzeisa kechomim. He happens to be in a minyan, and they don't wait for tzeisa kechomim, but he wants to be from. So the eitzah is count together with them without a bracha, and if you'll remember after tzeisa kechomim, you'll count again with a bracha. There are three problems with this pshat. Number one, ikechosim in a sefer. Shekiah doesn't say that this halacha refers to a medaktik that wants to wait till it says akachovim. Problem number two, hamisparel im hatzibur meba'od yom moine imohem b'loi brocha seems to be a psak. This is a psak, moine imohem b'li brocha. According to the Taz, I could count with a brocha. It's bein hashmoshes. I don't want to count with a bracha because I prefer to be from and wait for tzeisa kechomim. But the lashon moine imohem b'li bracha seems to be that's what you should do. And the third problem is meba'od yom. After the Shekiah, it's not meba'od yom. It is sofek yom, sofek laila. And therefore, the pshat of the levush and the Choik Yankov is far more reasonable. And their pshat is you're davening with a minyan before the Shekiah, and that is meba'od yom. You can't say a bracha meba'od yom because most of the poskim say you're not yoitze. However, because some poskim say you could be yoitze, we recommend to be on the safe side. First count without a bracha. You can't say a bracha because according to the majority of poskim, you're not yoitze. But some say you are yoitze. So b'diavad, if you're going to forget to count late at night, we will let you say a bracha the other night because after all, I counted. And this halacha is based on the assumption that b'di'eved you're yoytze la'achar plag hamincha. And that is pshat hamispal l'matzibo meba'od yom, and meba'od yom, like everywhere else, means it's still day. Not sufek yom, sufek laila, not after the Shekiah. And that is why moina imo and b'loi brocha, you cannot say a brocha. But we still say, you have a minyan. Take advantage of the minyan. First count. And then late at night, you're going home, you might forget. So the other night, at least, I have a suffix. And you could continue counting with the brocha the other night. That is the pshat of the Chok Yaakov. So this sif clearly seems to indicate that b'di'eved, you could rely on the Sefira meba'od yom la'achar plag hamincha. We have a tshuva of Rabbi Yosef, the last source on our sheet, number 18. And the tshuva was written, l'chvoid hagoen hamuvak Rabbi Elio Sternbuch. I had a very close relationship with Rabbi Elio Sternbuch, was the Av based in Antwerp. For many years, I used to visit Antwerp once a year for a weekend of Arbotzes Torah. And in those years, I developed a very close relationship with three most choshev rabbonim in Antwerp. Reb Chaim Kreisvit, whose son was our unforgettable Rosh Hashiva, and Reb Chaim was one of the greatest giants of Torah of our time. Reb Weiss, who later was the Av Beis of the Eidach HaRedes in Yerushalayim, and Reb Eli Sternbuch. These were the three great rabbonim of Antwerp. And I used to arrive Monday to Sunday, and I gave about 25 shiurim. I never counted how many, but in all the shuls and all the yeshivas in Antwerp. And I spent some time with these gedalim. So in Antwerp, as in many cities in Europe, especially the northern cities, when you go up north, nightfall is very late. And most people daven an early matter before they go home. So Rabbi Eli Sternbuch turned to Rabbi Yosef, could we say Sefira before the Shekiah? And Rabbi Yosef said, no, you can't. You daven Maariv, but you don't count Sefira, and everybody will count Sefira at home, which is not a very pleasant psak, because it is clear to us that many people will forget and they won't count Sefira. And that is very common. And that is why the minig is to count Sefira right after Maariv. Sefiras HaOmer has nothing to do with Tefillah. It's a mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. But the minig is to count after Maariv because we want it to be a community endeavor, so everybody will count and nobody will forget. Because, a lot of people forget to say Kriya Shema Shalamito, and we don't want the same to happen with Sefiras HaOmer. So, Rabbi Yosef Paskint, you can say Sefira before the Shekiah based on Tshuvas Maharshal. Let's have a look at source number 8. Bein Pesach l'Shavuos Mavochen Sefira HaOmer bebeis HaKnesses achar kiddush miyad av shadayin shove chetzi ad halaylo. And this question deals with people that make an early Shabbos. So in America and in Europe, this is very common. So many people make an early Shabbos because Shabbos is very late. And Etzisol, not that many people, but in my opinion, you can make an early Shabbos even lechatchila in Etzisol. I totally disagree with people that say minig Yerushalayim. That's not a minig Yerushalayim. There's no such a concept as a minig what you don't do. The only concept of a minig is what you do do. Ein kazeh davar minig not to make an early Shabbos. There's no such a concept of a minig what we don't do. A minig is only what you do do. I don't see any difference between Etzisol and Chutz La'aretz. So in Ramot, I never daven early because I daven in my shul. But some of my children make an early Shabbos summer, and that's okay. So the question was, people that make an early Shabbos, after the Plag, could they count Sefira? And the Mashal says no. And he deals with two different questions. One question is, to Sefer Shabbos, we were Makabel Shabbos. Does that have an effect on Sefiras HaOmer? The fact that we were Makabel Shabbos. does that mean, this is a fundamental question I wrote about in Minchas Rosh, I think, Parshas Boy. Does Shevet Shabbos, does that mean that you have Shabbos on a Friday? Or does that mean that Friday turns into Shabbos? Is it night or is it the day? Do you lift Shabbos and part of Friday becomes Shabbos? Or do you push down the day and part of the day becomes night? And that was the question. The fact that we were Makabel Shabbos, does that permit to count Sefira? Is it considered night or day? And the Mishal says, the Sefer Shabbos has no effect on any halacha besides Shabbos. It has no bearing on any other mitzvah. Sefiras HaOmer needs to be by night. That is one part of the psak. And then he says, even according to Rabbeinu Tam, that we rely on the plag, that is only by Kriya Shema, but not by other mitzvahs. That's the Mashal. But the Mashal doesn't really explain why would there be a difference between Kriya Shema and other mitzvahs. So this entire sugya starts with the Mishnah source number 10. Tfilas hashachar ad chatzois. Rabbi Yehuda Omer dalet shos. Tfilas hamincha ad oerev. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad plag hamincha. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't have a mincha after the plag, which means after the plag is night. The Gemara daf chav zayin. Tfilas hamincha ad oerev. Omer Rav Chizda Rav Yitzchak, Hosam Omer Rav Kana loch Rabbi Yehuda. Hochamai. Ishtik v'lo Omer Rav Lamida. Omer Rav Chizda nechzanan. Mida Rav Matzah Shabbos b'yerev, Shabbos meba'od yom shmamna loch Rabbi Yehuda. Adarabba. Mida Rav Huna Bona lo eva Matzah shmamna loch Rabbi Yehuda. And this is the punchline. Hashted de lo itmer hilchase lo kamar v'lo kamar, the Ovid kamar Ovid, or the Ovid kamar Ovid. You could accept Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and that means from the plag is night. But you don't need to. You could paskin according to the Chumim and assume that after the plag you could still daven mincha. You can't do both in the same day, which means, and this is a very common question in the summer, in America, in Europe, and usually Bein Zmanim, I spent some time in Europe, at Botzes and in the hotels they always have the dilemma. They can't make a late Suda Shabbos because people with kids, it's too late. So they always make an early Shabbos. So it's always planned that you'd have a mincha right before the plag, and then Marav right after the plag. Because you can't daven both mincha and both Marav between the plag and the Shekiah, because that is a contradiction minay obey. Is it day or night? It cannot be both day and both night. So you are entitled to be noyek Rav Yehuda. After plag is night, we could daven Marav, but then you need to have mincha before the plag. Could I one day be noyek Rav Yehuda and another day kechachomim? Yes, b'shas adchak. But in the same day, you can't do both. So the Gemara says, the Ovid Kamar Ovid or the Ovid Kamar Ovid. Usually everybody remembers the first Tosfos in Shas. It's not on our sheet. But the first Tosfos in Shas, Brochas Beis Amud Aleph, the big Tosfos, Tosfos deals with our minig. And when Tosfos says our minig, it's minig Ashkenaz. We daven Marav after the plag before the Shekiah. What do we rely on? It's not night yet. And Kriya Shema Shel Avos needs to be by night. Two drochim in Tosfos. One is we rely on Kriya Shema Shel Alamito, because most people should say and do say Kriya Shema before they go to bed. And we rely, we're Yotzi Yadei Chovis Kriya Shema Shel Avos, Kriya Shema Shel Alamito. The primary mahalach in Tosfos is Shittas Rabbeinu Tam. We rely on Rav Yehuda. After plag, you could be Yotze Kriya Shema Shel Alamito. Comes along the Marshal and he says, it's only regarding Kriya Shema, but not regarding other mitzvahs. And based on the Marshal, Rabbi Yosef Paskin for Rabbi Yosh Sternbuch, you can't say Sefiras HaOmer before the Shekiah. And to me, this pshat is somewhat questionable. So the Marshal says, we don't rely on Rabbi Yehuda Plaga Mincha only regarding Kriya Shema. This is a very famous tshuva in Trumas Hadeshen. And the Trumas Hadeshen is considered Avi Minhagei Ashkenaz. And the Ramo quotes the Trumas Hadeshen all the time. ברוב הקהילס נוהגים ביומם ארוכים בימי הקיץ לקרוא קריאה שמע של ארבס ולהתפלל תפילת ארבס ג' או ד' שעות לפני צייס הכיכובים. Could we rely on this minhag? He struggles because Gimel v'Dalet choice is before the plag. And therefore the Tumas Hadeshen says, I have almost no basis to be miyash of this minhag. V'yafal piken, I'm not going to come out against the minhag. It is the minhag in Ashkenaz. The Davamarav before the plag. But he struggles with this minhag. But it is clear to him that after the plag, you could rely on the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. Very small letters. What I'm looking for is, and if anybody finds it, just pinpoint me where to go. He writes that we rely on the plag afilu legabe kriya shema. Does anybody see where he writes this line? Af legabe kriya shema. And if the Tumas Hadeshen writes, we rely on the plag, that plag is night, afilu legabe kriya shema, it clearly seems to indicate not only legabe kriya shema, but rather the other way around. Because there's a havim in it to say that regarding kriya shema, you need to wait for nightfall because b'shachvacho, people don't go to sleep by the plaga mincha when it's still daylight outside. In days of yore, v'anachnu oisim b'malocha mi alois hachamo ad seis hakechovim. It's written in Sefer Nehemiah. So people used to go to bed by nightfall when it became dark, not by plaga mincha when it's still broad daylight. So the Tumas Hadeshen says we rely on the plag even regarding Kriya Shema, which clearly seems to indicate regarding other mitzvahs, definitely Kriya Shema is a revusa. So at the beginning of the tshuva, he quotes Rabbeinu Tam, and that is the shit of Rabbeinu Tam, also brought in Tosfos Daf Beis Amud Aleph. The Mashal says no, we don't rely on the plag only for Kriya Shema. But I argue there are two seifim in Shulchan Aruch that go against the Marshal. Tofresh Tzadik Beis, number 14, Tofresh Ayin Beis, number 15. Let's have a look. Mishu onus ktsas, ve'eino yochal leilach lebeis hakneses, ve'tzorach lahamtin ad achar shekaru hakol, ve'kosha olav leisha betanas kol kach. Person is at home. He can't go to Shiur. He's shvach, he's ill, he's at home. And it's Tanas Esther. It's a fast day. He's not living in Yerushalayim. And he'll need to wait till they finish Mikra Megillah in Shiur and people come home from Shiur. No. So the Shulchan Aruch says, what could he do? יוכל לשמוע קריוסה מבעוד יום מפלג המנחה ולמעלה. So the Gemara says דף ד' במסכת מגילה, אומר רב שיעור בן לוי, מצווה לקרויסה בלילה ולאחזו ולשנויסה ביום. Mikra Megillah needs to be by night. But b'shas adchak, the Shulchan Aruch says, you could be yoitza Megillah after the plag. Tofresh Ayin Beis, source number 15. Ein madlikin ha'chanukah koidim shetishka chama. אלו הם סוף שקיעוסו. לא מאחרים ולא מקדימים. יש מי שאומר שאם הוא טרוד, יכול להקדים מפלג המנחה ולמעלה. ובלבד שייתן שמן, עד שתכלה רגל מנשוק. So both regarding Hanukkah and Megillah. In both cases, it's not a lechatchila. But b'shas Chag, either somebody that needs to leave his home on Hanukkah, or a person that's hard for him to extend the fast for another hour and a half or 2 hours, you could be yotze both Megillah and Hanukkah from the plag. Why would Sefiras HaOmer be different? And this goes against the Marshal. The Marshal says we rely on the plag only regarding Kriya Shema. It's not so. We rely on the plag regarding Megillah and Hanukkah. And Kriya Shema is a diuraisa. Megillah, Hanukkah, Sefiras HaOmer b'zman hazeh mid'Rabbanan. And therefore, I think, b'shas Chag, we could count the Sefira from the plag and later. Ve'ein halochi kedivrei hamarshal, because two Sifrei Shulchan Aruch contradict the Marshal. And b'shas Chag, we rely on the plag regarding all of the halachas and not only Kriyas Shema. So regarding Hanukkah, this is also an interesting psak I gave. A person needs to leave his house, and he will not be at home from before the Shekiah till late at night. What is preferable? To light ner Hanukkah after the plag? Yesh mi HaOmer. It's not everybody's opinion, but the Machabed does agree. Yesh mi HaOmer is Mahari Abuhav, quoted in the Bes Yosef. Or is it better to rely on the tour that b'diavad you could light ner Hanukkah the Reis Shachar, even though it's after Chatzos? Machlekes Rambam and Tur. Both opinions are paskened in Shulchan Aruch. Both opinions are not everybody agrees. So la'achar Chatzos the Machlekes Rambam and Tur. Shulchan Aruch paskens according to the Tur. You could light with a bracha. Before the Shekiah, Maria Bohav. Shulchan Aruch paskens, you could light with a bracha. Which one is preferable? What do you guess? What would you pasken? Maybe someday you're all going to be big poskim. What do you think? Just use your head. Use your logic. What would be better? Plag or late at night? What? What? Great. Great. I think that's the right answer. If you light with a plag, at the end of the day, you're going to have Pesum Manissa. And Hanukkah is primarily about Pesum Manissa. If you're light late at night, you're losing Pesum Manissa. You could be Yotze B'diavad in both cases. Why not have Pesum Manissa? Another reason to prefer the plag? Another reason? Does anybody come up with another reason to prefer the plag? Zizim Makdimin. Great. If you could either light it earlier or later, why not Zizim Makdimin? So you helped me formulate a tshuva, and that was my psak. If it's either after the plag, before the Shekiah, relying on Maria Boav, or relying on the Tur, la'achar shekol sur regel manashuk, and both opinions, Shulchan Aruch says you could make a bracha, and both opinions are questionable. Machlokes and poskim. For two reasons, we would prefer a plag and not after Chatzos or la'achar shekol sur regel manashuk. So b'shas Chag, one could be Yotze Sefiras HaOmer after the plag. Based on Minig Ashkenaz, Shittas Rabbeinu Tam, and the Tumas Hadesh, and many others, that we could rely, the Ovid Kamar Ovid, and one could rely on Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, Le'achar Plag HaMincha is considered night. With a bracha. With a bracha. Just like Chanukah, just like Mikra Megillah. In both of these halachas, we say a bracha. But the bracha, as we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, if there's a chance, you will count again. The Achad says, don't make a bracha earlier. But if, in the nursing home, my psak was with a bracha. And why with a bracha? This is a fundamental I learned for the Moshe Feinstein. I think it's the Nigis Moshe Chelek Aleph Siman Ayin Ches. I'm not sure. And the Moshe has oh, here it is. Yeah, Siman Yud, number 17. Chelek Aleph Siman Yud. And this was written in Russia, Tov Reish Tzadik Beis, almost 100 years ago. Misha Hoylach al kol hayoyim la'avodo, v'hi efshar la'niach tefillin b'kol hayoyim, אם יש לאטר להניח תפילין קודם המועד השחר. And this is a tshuva which is based totally on a das yochid, putting on tefillin before alois hashachar, not before Mashiach or before alois hashachar. But this is a very pressing question in many cities in Europe. In St. Petersburg, in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the winter, Alois Shacha would be 8 o'clock in the morning. People work. Only a kollel guy could afford to daven Shachar at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. But people go to work. What do they do? The Moshe says you could put on tefillin before Alois Shachar with a bracha. Why not without a bracha? The Moshe says when you give a psak to the public, to be Mekayim a mitzvah without the brocha, that is a terrible michshol. It is inevitable that they will be mezalzel in this mitzvah. Because these people, since they're bar mitzvah, they put on tefillin every day with a brocha. And you're going to tell them put on tefillin without a brocha, the result will always be a total zilzal in mitzvah tefillin. And at the end of the day, people won't put on tefillin because they won't understand. Without a brocha means it's not a mitzvah. Many years ago, one of my Talmidim became the Rav in Würzburg in Germany. Würzburg was a very choshev kel, and many Gedolim were in Würzburg. But when he came to that city, there weren't many Gedolim there, and there was total amaratzis. And the women of the community used to be light Neres Shabbos when the husbands left the homes to go to Shul, Beleil Shabbos, and that was before the plag, not after the plag, before the plag. And he asked me, should I change this minig? Because according to the Mishnah Brura, it's a bracha levatori. You can't be makabel to Sefer Shabbos before the plag. But he said the result will be most of the ladies will be madlik na Shabbos when the husbands come home from Shul, and that'll be la'achat seisach kachov. Because they are totally unaccustomed and unaware of Zmanei Hayoim. You know, people that aren't Talmidei Chachomim, they're not aware that your clock bears halachic significance. So most of the ladies won't look at a luach, when is the time of it? Look, it's the night. It's either the light before the husbands go to Shul or the light when the husbands come back from Shul. And that'll be a massive Chilul Shabbos. So I paskin, don't change the minig. They should light before the husbands go to Shul with a brocha. So the Trumas Adeshin we have in our sheet, the last two lines are fascinating. Fascinating. He tells a story. Shamati b'yeshiva mepi echod hagedolim, 5 lines from the bottom. Sheshoma v'kibel, ki ebea kadmoinem b'krims, and that is Crimea. Crimea is the first part of the Ukraine that Russia took over 10 years ago. B'yamei kadmoinem b'krims, hispalelu arvis, וקוראו את השמה בערב שבס באויד היום גודל כל כך, שהיו רב הוא עיר, שהיו מהגדולים הקדמונים, הוא וכל טובי הכל עמוי, הלכו לטייל אחר אכילה של סעודה שבס על שפת הנהר דונאי, והיו חוזרים לבתיהם קודם הלילה. וגם כוסף בשם אחד הגדולים, שואל הספר עליו וזה קרוא שמה באויד היום גודל מאויד, לצורך סודס נישואין. משמע דמקדם, או יבקל ההוידס כולו, to be Mekal Shabbos, before Plag HaMincha. So they used to go to shul, daven Marav, Kriya Shema, make Kiddush, eat Suda Shabbos, and then take a walk on the river in broad daylight. After Suda Shabbos, in broad daylight. So Minig Ashkenaz in those days was to be Makar Shabbos before the Plag. And the Pnei Yeshua has a long arichas, Kuntasach and Ambroches, and he says, that's our Minig. That's Minig Ashkenaz. To be Makar Shabbos before the Plag, Lo Kedivra Mishnah Brura. And because the concern was real Chil Shabbos, a massive Chil Shabbos, because it was clear to him. So the tshuva that I wrote him, which was recently printed, I wrote, well, I rely on you. I hope in 2 or 3 years, you'll bring this Kehele to real halachic observance, and people will become aware that there are Zmanei Hayoim, and then you'll teach them that Adlokas Ner Shabbos needs to be for the Shekiah, after Plag HaMincha. But for the time being, Anach Lehem B'minhogam. So the question was, should you light candles with a bracha or without a bracha? And it was clear to me, if you tell a woman to light Ner Shabbos without a bracha, when exactly will they cover their eyes and daven for kinderlech and for their children? Are we mavater on this beautiful minig that Noshim Tzedkoniyos, no matter how frum they are, cover their eyes and they plead with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, they should have nachas from their kids? We want their kids to be Talmidei Chachamim. You can't paskin that women should be madlik Ner Shabbos without a bracha. And the same regarding Sefiras HaOmer. You never paskin to be makayim a mitzvah in public without a bracha. And that's what we learned from the Tshuva Nigis Moshe regarding Anochos Tefillin. So we passed the tipping point of Sefiras HaOmer. And this week we were at the second stage, second half of Sefiras HaOmer. And Sefiras HaOmer is always a double count, Yomim and Shavuos. Mem tes Yomim. Rabbi Sol Salanta taught us Talmidim. Mem tes Yomei Svira coincide with Mem ches Dvorim Shatoyre Nikneis Behem. And he actually demanded every day of Yomei Svira you work on one of those Mem ches Kinyon HaTorah that we learn in Ovis Perek Vav. And whenever I share this thought, I ask, Ma ichpat lechazal? Why didn't they say HaTorah Nikneis B'Mem Tes Dvorim? If the Brisa would say, HaTorah Nikneis B'Mem Tes Dvorim, my drosha would be magnificent. It would be so obvious and so clear. 49 days of Svira are connected 49 Kinyon HaTorah. As if lahachas, Chazal say, no, it's not 49, 48. It would be so easy for me to add another one. I have a lot of ideas to add another one to fill in the number 49. It's not the way we learn Chazal. Everything Chazal say is Ruach HaKodesh. And using the language of the first Mishnah in Masechet Megillah. You remember the Mishnah? Megillah in the case of Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Aleph, Tezvav, Loi Pochos, V'Loi Yoisa. HaTorah Nikneis, Ba'arboim V'Shmoyne Dvorim, Lo Pochos, V'Loi Yoisa. Alehem ein Losif, Umehem ein Ligroa. You can't achieve Torah with 47, and you don't need 49. 48 is 48. But still, Rabbi Soslanta didn't want to forego this idea because 48 and 49 are so close, they must coincide. So what do we do with a spare day? That's our dilemma. What do we do with that spare day? So Rabbi Soslanta says that spare day is dedicated to Chazorah. Not likely. 49 days of Svira is a Minat Torah. Memches Kinyon HaTorah is a Braisa. Chazorah is not a din. Chazorah is a deraisa, it's not a derabbanan. It's a minig in yeshivas. Actually, I wish it would be a minig in yeshivas. It should be, but it's not. So that day has nothing to do with Chazorah. So what is that spare day? Livi Yoimeli. Nidda da feinu mit Weiss. Chazal tell a story. Anshay Alexandria shel Mitzrayim had an appointment with Rabbi Shekiah ben Hanania, and they came to ask questions. Lahavdil, many people, Shiva boys come to me for a Q&A session, and they had a lot of questions. Some of them were stupid questions, and some of them were smart questions. Not for me to decide, but that's what the Gemara says. Divrei boirus, stupid questions, and they had some real questions. One of the questions they asked Rabbi Shekiah ben Hanania, Ma yasa adam v'yechkam? How does one achieve chachma? And his response was the most natural one. Yarbe b'yeshiva v'yamayit b'schoira. Learn basmoda. Minimize your business, maximize your learning, and you're going to be great. Amru loy, harba osuken v'lo yonsa b'yodam. We know so many people that learn basmoda, and not all of them grew to be giants in Torah, grew to be teachers of Torah. Amelohem yevakesh memi shachochme shaloi. Daven. Daven to have siyata d'shmaya. And the Gemara says, ha beloha lo kaimi. You'll never achieve greatness in Torah, only by working hard and by davening. This Monday, I was for one day in Chutz La'aretz, and I visited the kever of Rebbe Shmelka. Anybody knows here who was Rebbe Shmelka? Where was he Rav? And who was he? Rebbe Shmelka of Niklisburg. Who was his Rebbe? Who was his Rebbe? Who was his brother? Daflo. Two brothers. Daflo is known as one of the greatest Gedolim. Just to appreciate how great Daflo was, he was a contemporary of the Noida B'Yehuda, somewhat younger than the Noida B'Yehuda. And the Noida B'Yehuda wrote the Tzlach and a few Masechtas in Shas, one of the greatest Achronim. And the Noida B'Yehuda writes, I planned to write a Sefer on Ksubis, but then suddenly Daflo came out, and I saw his great Sefer. I don't have much to add on. And he decided, I'm not going to write a Sefer on Ksubis. So Daflo was one of the greatest Gedolim. And Daflo writes in his introduction that his Chavrusa was his older brother, Reb Shmelka. So Reb Shmelka was one of the great Hasidic masters, and both of them were Talmidim of the Maggid, of the great Maggid of Mezrich, who was the Baal Shem Tov's greatest Talmid. I visited his cave on Monday. I flew out for one day to visit the cave of the Chassam Sofer, and Amot Chabenet and Reb Shmelka were buried one next to the other. And Reb Shmelka was one of the Rebbeim of Reb Mordechai Bennett. The Maharsham. Anybody heard of the Maharsham? Who was the Maharsham? Maharsham? When you're going to be a Avreichem and Koilan, you're going to learn halacha, you're going to know a lot about the Maharsham. He was not a very yeshivish guy, but Reb Sholem Mordechai HaKohen Shvadron, and the famous Yerushalmi Maggid, Reb Sholem Shvadron, was a descendant of the Maharsham. So this story is not just a Hasidic Maisa written in story books. The Maharsham writes that the Rebbe Reb Shmelka once in his yeshiva said, it is impossible to be Mechadish and Emes Achidish and Torah unless you said with Kavona Ahavo Rabba in that day. Unless you said Berchas Kriya Shema Ahavo Rabba Aftonu, if you didn't say it with Kavona, you can be Mechadish Adover Emes B'Torah. One of the Talmidim, well, he had a lot of guts, got up and said, Rebbe, I'm embarrassed to say, but I wasn't Mechaven this morning, and still I had a great Chiddush. And Rebbe Reb Shmelka said, well, let's hear what you Machadish. And he proved that it's totally off track. The Maharsham doesn't say what the Chiddush was. I would be very interested to hear what that Chiddush is. And let us decide whether he's right or wrong. I don't know what he said, but it's an important story. So Rabbi Shekiah ben Hanania says, if you want to achieve greatness in Torah, it's not enough to learn Basmoda. Yevakesh memi shachachma shaloi. And maybe that is the spare day. 48 days for 48 Kinyan Torah. We worked so hard, and we're still so far away. And then you lift your eyes to the heavens and say, Rabbeinu Shalom, you love us, you love your Torah. We work so hard. Give us siyata d'shmai. And let us achieve greatness in Torah. So the Memtes Yemei Svira are like a ladder that has 49 rungs. And each rung, between one rung and the other, is 1.5 feet. So when you walk up a flight of stairs, sometimes you feel that it's hard. Well, sometimes the elevator out here doesn't work and I need to walk up these 5 flights. These are very bad steps in this building. And at my age, you realize good steps and bad steps. Sometimes you go up a flight of stairs without any effort. Sometimes you feel after 3 stairs that this is demanding. And the difference might be 1 centimeter, but it makes a difference. So that ladder has 49 rungs, 1.5 feet. Each rung is an effort. And the person climbs up that ladder with a tremendous effort. He's almost at the top of the ladder. He lifts his eyes and he's horrified. The top rung is missing. There's no way he could get up there. And he looks down and he's even more terrified and he says, I'm not even going to try to go down this ladder because that is dangerous. It's far more dangerous going down than up. You might slip and crash to your death. He's up there almost at the top of the ladder and he says, what am I going to do now? I can't go up. So he starts yelling, is there anyone up there? Does anybody hear me? Please. Could you give me a hand? Maybe give me some rope. I'm not going to go down. I need to go up, but I can't. So Sefiras HaOmer is a ladder, 49 rungs. And each rung is an effort. Kinyonei Torah. Mem chezvorim shetorah nikneis ben. And we work very hard. And we're at the top of the ladder. But we cannot get there. The top rung is missing. And what are we supposed to go down? Go all the way down? We don't want to go down because we're so happy that we came up. But how will we get to the top? Then you cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rabbeinu Shalom, you're up there, and you hear me, and you see my plight. Will you please give me a hand? Will you please help me up? And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps you up. You have whom to rely on. And then he is Zoiche, Doidi Sholach Yodoi Menachor, V'mayai Homuloi. That's the 49th day. So Talmidim Yikorim, I don't mean to say wait with your tefillas till Erev Shavuos. No, that's going to be a bit late. Erev Yom Tov is too busy. Don't wait till Erev Yom Tov. This is symbolic. These ideas are symbolisms. Day 49 just teaches you the importance of tefillah. Day 49 teaches you that as much as you work hard, you're not going to get there on your own. You need siyata d'shmai. You need to daven. And there's no other bracha I'm aware of that is said with such passion as Ahavor Rabbo. How many times do we mention Rachamim in this bracha? Ovinu, Avu Rachamon, Hamarachem, Rachem Aleinu. It is as if a person on his deathbed crying out to Kodesh Baruch Hu, I want to live. I want to live. Give me a refuah. No other bracha contains so much passion as the bracha on Torah. The same b'libeinu bino, lahoven, lahaskel, lilmoid, lalamoid, לשמור ולעשות סולקיים, es kol divrei salme torosecha. So daven. Without davening, we never get there. Lo'uk migerse, siyata deshmaya. And that is day 49. Yerotzon sheichel kenu HaOmer. HaKadosh Baruch Hu shall accept our tefillas because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets millions of tefillas every day. So most of them ask for, I want money, I want covet, I want power, I want esteem, I want status, I want this, I want that. Some of them are legitimate, bakoshes, refuas, Yeshuas. But the most precious tefillas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu are the ones in which Yeshiva boy davens, Rabbeinu Shalom, what am I asking for? What am I asking for? I just want to learn your Torah. I want to make you happy. I want to make a nachas ruach for all Visha v'shamayim. Those are the most precious tefillas. And those are the tefillas that are most likely to be answered. Ma yasod v'yechkam, yarbe v'yeshiva, v'yamayit b'schoira. Harba osukem v'layolsa b'yodam. Yavakesh memi shachach mishaloi. Have a beautiful Shabbos.